Hey there, language learners. Welcome back to our channel. In today's video, we're diving into 45 confusing English words that often trip people up, even native speakers. Whether you're a beginner or looking to refine your vocabulary, this list will definitely come in handy. From words that look similar but have different meanings to those that sound alike but are used in different contexts, we've got it all covered. So, grab a pen and paper and let's start entangling the web of confusing English words. Sure, here's a list of 45 confusing English words that are often misunderstood, misused, or hard to differentiate for learners. These words can be tricky, but understanding them will make your communication clearer and more effective. These words often confuse learners because they sound similar, look alike, or are used in subtle ways that affect their meaning. Perfect for discussing in detail. Certainly. Here's the list of 45 confusing words with their meanings and examples to illustrate how they're used in real life. Let's start with work versus job. Work refers to tasks or activities you do for a living, while a job is a specific position or role you hold in an organization. For example, I had to do a lot of work at home today. Versus, he got a new job as a software developer. Let's dive into more examples. Loan versus debt. A loan is money borrowed that needs to be repaid with interest, while debt is the amount owed. For example, she took out a loan to buy a car. Versus, I'm struggling with my student debt. Rent versus lease. Rent is payment for the use of something, typically on a short-term basis, while lease is a long-term agreement to rent something, usually for a year or more. For example, I have to pay my rent every month. Versus, I signed a 2-year lease on my apartment. Raise versus raise. Raise means to lift or increase something, while raise means to destroy or demolish something. For example, they gave me a raise at work. Versus, the old building was raised to make room for a new park. Next, we have breach versus breach. Breach is a violation or breaking of a law or agreement, while breach refers to the lower part of the body or an opening in a structure. For example, there was a breach of contract in the deal. Versus, the baby was born in a breach position. Accept versus accept. Accept means to receive or agree to something, while accept means to exclude something. For example, I accept your invitation to dinner. Versus, everyone is going to the party except Tom. Stationary versus stationary. Stationary means not moving or staying in one place, while stationary refers to materials used for writing, such as paper and pens. For example, the car was stationary at the traffic light. Versus, I bought new stationery for my office. Moving on, we have compliment versus compliment. Compliment is a praise or admiration, while compliment is something that completes or goes well with something else. For example, she gave me a lovely compliment on my dress. Versus, the wine was a perfect compliment to the meal. Effect versus effect. Effect means to influence or make an impact on something, while effect is the result or outcome of something. For example, the weather can affect your mood. Versus, the effect of the new policy was immediately noticeable. Imply versus infer. Imply means to suggest or hint at something without stating it directly, while infer means to deduce or conclude something from evidence or reasoning. For example, his words imply that he's not happy. Versus, from his silence, I inferred that he was upset. Next up, principal versus principal. Principal refers to the head of a school or organization, or the main amount of a loan, while principle is a fundamental belief or rule. For example, the school principal gave a speech, versus, he stood by his principles, even when it was difficult. Capital versus capital. Capital refers to money or resources for investment, or the city where the government is based, while capital is a building where the legislative body meets. For example, the capital of France is Paris. Versus, the president delivered a speech in the Capitol building. Illicit versus illicit. Illicit means to draw out a response or reaction, while illicit means illegal or forbidden by law. For example, the detective tried to elicit information from the suspect. Versus, he was arrested for possessing illicit drugs. Let's continue with confident versus confidential. Confident means feeling sure of oneself, while confidential refers to private or secret information. For example, she felt confident about the exam. Versus, this is a confidential document. Farther versus further. Farther refers to physical distance, while further refers to progress, depth, or additional distance. For example, the mountain is farther than I thought. Versus, I need further information on the subject. Formally versus formerly. Formally means in accordance with established rules or etiquette, while formerly means previously, in the past. For example, he formally introduced himself to the audience. Versus, he was formerly a lawyer before becoming a teacher. Next, we have insure versus insure. Insure means to make certain or guarantee, while insure means to protect against risk, typically through an insurance policy. For example, please ensure that the door is locked. Versus, you should insure your car against accidents. Cite versus cite. Cite means to quote or refer to a source, while cite refers to a location or place. For example, please ensure that you cite your sources in the report. Versus, the construction site was busy with workers. Discreet versus discreet. Discreet means careful or tactful in speech or behavior, while discreet means separate or distinct. For example, please be discreet about the surprise party. Versus, the data was divided into discrete categories. Let's look at sight versus sight. Sight refers to the ability to see, or a view, while sight refers to a location or area. For example, the sight of the sunset was breathtaking. Versus, the new site for the park was selected. Stationary versus stationary. Stationary means not moving, while stationary refers to writing materials like paper and pens. For example, the car remains stationary in traffic. Versus, I bought new stationery for my office. Adverse versus averse. Adverse means harmful or unfavorable, while averse means having a strong dislike or opposition. For example, the adverse weather conditions delayed the flight. Versus, she was averse to the idea of moving to a new city. Next, we have eminent versus imminent. Eminent means famous, respected, or important, while imminent means about to happen soon. For example, he is an eminent scientist in the field. Versus, the storm is imminent, so we need to prepare. Humorous versus humorous. Humorous refers to something funny or amusing. For example, he broke his humerus during the game. Versus, his humorous jokes made everyone laugh. Elude versus elude. Elude means to refer to something indirectly, while elude means to escape or evade. For example, the author alluded to a future event in the story. Versus, the criminal managed to elude capture for months. Let's continue with assure versus ensure. Assure means to promise or make someone feel confident, while ensure means to make certain or guarantee something will happen. For example, I assure you that everything will be fine. Versus, please ensure that all safety protocols are followed. Lose versus lose. Lose means to misplace something or fail to win, while lose means to misplace something or fail to win. For example, my shoes are loose, and I need to tighten them. Versus, I don't want to lose my keys. Coarse versus coarse. Coarse means rough in texture, while coarse refers to a sequence of events. For example, the sand on the beach was coarse. Versus, he is taking an advanced math course. Next, we have altar versus altar. Altar refers to a structure for religious ceremonies, while alter means to change or modify something. For example, they exchanged vows at the altar. Versus, she plans to alter her dress for the wedding. Disinterested versus uninterested. Disinterested means impartial or unbiased, while uninterested means not interested. For example, the judge remained disinterested in the case. Versus, he was uninterested in the movie. Emigrate versus immigrate. Emigrate means to leave one's own country to live in another, while immigrate means to come to a new country to live. For example, they decided to emigrate from their homeland. Versus, she immigrated to the US from India. Let's look at envelope versus envelope. Envelope means to surround or cover something, while envelope refers to a flat container used to hold letters. For example, the fog began to envelop the city. Versus, please put the letter in the envelope. Deny versus refuse. Deny means to say something is not true or to reject, while refuse means to decline to accept something. For example, he denied all accusations of wrongdoing. Versus, she refused to accept the invitation. Compliment versus compliment. Compliment means something that completes or enhances another thing, while compliment is a praise or expression of admiration. For example, the wine is the perfect complement to the steak. Versus, he gave her a compliment on her dress. Next, we have eminent versus imminent. Eminent means highly regarded or respected, while imminent means about to happen soon. For example, she is an eminent professor in her field. Versus, the meeting is imminent. It starts in 5 minutes. Capital versus capital. Capital refers to the city where a government is based or the financial resources available, while capital is a building where the legislative body meets. For example, the capital of Spain is Madrid. Versus, the senator gave a speech in the capital. Resign versus re-sign. Resign means to quit a position or job, while re-sign means to sign again, often a contract. For example, he had to resign from his position due to personal reasons. Versus, I need to re-sign the contract for next year. Let's continue with prescribe versus proscribe. Prescribe means to recommend or authorize the use of something, usually medicine, while proscribe means to forbid or prohibit something. For example, the doctor prescribed medicine for the cold. Versus, the law proscribes the use of illegal substances. Cereal versus cereal. Cereal refers to a type of food usually eaten at breakfast, while serial means something that happens in a series or sequence. For example, I had cereal for breakfast. Versus, the detective worked on a serial case. Hear versus hear. Hear means to perceive sound, while hear refers to a location. For example, I can hear the music playing. Versus, please come here and sit down. Next, we have tale versus tale. Tale refers to a story or narrative, while tail means the part of an animal that extends behind. For example, he told a thrilling tale about his adventures. Versus, the dog wagged its tail happily. Meat versus meat. Meat refers to the edible flesh of animals, while meet means to come together or encounter someone. For example, I ate a steak for dinner. Versus, I'm excited to meet you at the cafe. To versus to. To is a preposition used to indicate direction or purpose, To means also or excessively, and to refers to the number. For example, I'm going to the store. Versus, I would like to join too. Versus, we have 2 cats at home. Let's look at their versus their versus their. Their means belonging to them. There refers to a place or location, and there is a contraction of they are. For example, their house is beautiful. Versus, the keys are over there. Versus, they're going to the movies. Then versus then. Then is used for comparisons, while then refers to time. For example, I am taller than my brother. Versus, first we went to the store, then we had lunch. These words are often mixed up due to similar spelling, pronunciation, or subtle differences in meaning. Including the meanings and real-life examples will definitely help to understand how to use these words correctly. And there you have it. 45 tricky English words that can be hard to remember and use correctly. Hopefully, this video helped clear up some of the confusion. If you found this useful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends who might need a little language boost. And, of course, if you have any other confusing words you'd like us to cover, drop them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Keep learning and keep practicing.